today I'm feeding and bottling some kombucha, and so I just figured I'd set up the camera and show you guys what I do. I know a lot of people have asked Sarah about kombucha and how it works, and so hopefully I can get this angle right and explain everything properly. But feel free to drop any comments below if you have any questions or comments. But we'll go from there. So this is my kombucha starter, mother, I guess a lot of people call it. I've had this for about 2 years now, and I know that sounds disgusting, but this is not the same liquid. The liquid's not 2 years old. I've just had this starter going for 2 years, and so the way how I got this started was I bought a bottle of just plain kombucha from the grocery store, and I mixed it with sweet tea, so the right ratio of black, green, and sugar and water. So I brewed sweet tea, and then once it cooled down, I mixed it with that starter that I bought from the grocery store, and then let it sit for probably a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then at that point, it was an established kombucha starter. And so the way it works is it's a living organism. So the benefits of drinking this kombucha are that there are a ton of probiotics. So probiotics are the big thing why people drink this. But what happens is the starter feeds off of the sugars that you put in the sweet tea, and so the sweet tea is like the medium, and the sugars are the food for the starter to feed off of, and so it really it multiplies. And so if you feed, you want to make like half a gallon of kombucha, you really only need probably a cup of starter, and so you don't need that much starter to make a bunch of kombucha. And so it's really cheap, which is nice. It's a lot cheaper than going to the grocery store. I think if you buy a bottle of GTs, like 16 or 24 ounce, it's probably $4. I could make that here for like 50 cents. And so it's really cost effective if you're going to drink it a lot. It really doesn't make sense to me to buy it if you can make it easily. So I'll explain how I feed this later, but right now I'm going to bottle some because this is ready. This has been fermenting for about a week now, probably 5 days actually. Um, and so you can let this go for as long or as short as you want. It's really just up to your flavor preference. So I would say minimum would be 4 days, and at 4 days you can start tasting it. And if it's sour enough for you, then you can go and bottle it. If it's too sour, then you can add more honey or some kind of sweetener. But I don't really like to do that because then that takes away some of the health benefits that you're getting. Um, but yeah, the longer you let it sit, the more it's going to feed off of that sugar and take sugar out of the drink, and so then obviously it's less sweet and more sour at that point. So what I'm going to do is I was planning on making some raspberry ginger kombucha. Um, I checked in the fridge and our ginger's all moldy, so I had to throw that away. So I'm just going to make some raspberry. So there's a few different ways you can do this. What I'm going to do is just use frozen raspberries. We got these from Azure Standard. We actually just picked up our order yesterday, and my wife made a video about that. So we have a few videos on how Azure works, but it's basically like a bulk grocery delivery service, but you have to pick it up at the drop location. But we get a lot of bulk foods from Azure, and it's really cost effective to us, so it works out. But I'm using their bulk frozen raspberries to make this batch. And so what I'm going to do here, I'll show you. I like to use these raspberries because they're already broken up, and so they're in little tiny pieces. Ideally, what I would do would be to blend these up with some of my kombucha starter and make like a syrup, almost like a liquid. But it's nap time in our house right now, and I don't want to wake anyone up. So I'm just going to do the best I can to get these raspberries in this bottle. So, and I'll try to show you that the best I can with this camera angle. So what I use is these flip top bottles. And so the purpose of this is once you have the fermented tea, the first ferment is what they call it. So just the fermented sweet tea. Once it's fermented long enough to your taste, so you let that ferment for like 4 days or so, then you can drink it straight. You can make a shrub, which is a whole other drink that I can go into towards the end. or you can bottle it. And the purpose of bottling this is you you add your fruit or your syrup or whatever flavoring you want, and then a little bit of some kind of sugar. So what I use is honey. You could also use sugar. I know people that use like maple syrup if you want a maple flavor, but in this instance, I'm just going to use honey. And so the purpose of that is it's going to keep feeding off of those sugars in the honey and the fruit. And since you have it sealed up in a bottle, I'm going to seal this up in this flip top bottle. It will, the byproduct is carbon dioxide. So as the bacteria feeds on the sugar, it will produce carbon dioxide. And since it has nowhere to go, it is going to turn into carbonation. And so with this, you do have to watch it because I've never had a bottle explode, but I've seen videos and it is possible. And so to prevent that, you definitely want to use round bottles, round flip top bottles. You want good quality ones. You don't want cheap, thin ones. We just bought these on Amazon. We got like a 12 pack. We have, I think this is 12 ounce and then 16 ounce. Um, and you also want to fill it up to the right spot on the bottle. So I usually fill it up right about that lip there. And so you don't want it any lower because apparently the way the bottle shape is, that creates more of a possibility to shatter. So what I'm going to do here is, and I don't use any measurements, this is how I do it, and I'm just going to show you how I do it. So I'm going to take the raspberries. This is 1/8 of a cup. I'm going to pour it in here, and these are going to get stuck in the funnel, so you just have to kind of get them down in there. I'm probably going to go get a skewer to help get that down. So I've got a skewer. I'm just going to push these down in there. And I know you can use like specific recipes. I get a lot of recipes from Reddit, Reddit. It's that website I use a lot. There's a kombucha subreddit, is what they call it, and they have it's just like an online forum where people share their kombucha recipes and stuff. So I get a lot of stuff from there. Um, this is just one of my go-tos, just simple fruit and honey. I also make a lot of I use strawberries a lot if we have fresh strawberries. Any fresh fruit is good. Frozen fruit is fine too. Just whatever you have, really. So I'm going to put a little bit more in there. That was 1/8 of a cup. And I know I don't use recipes, and the reason is because it's just whatever you're feeling like. If you're feeling like you want a little fruitier flavor, then add some more fruit. If you don't, then don't add the fruit. If you want it to be sweeter, add some more honey. I don't care. Make it however you would like. That's about good for that bottle. So my rule of thumb, how I kind of think about it, is you want to fill up about 20% of the bottle. That's, I don't know, pretty close. And then I'm going to top it off with a little bit of honey. Give it a good squirt. Just measuring by the heart today. And again, that's going to kind of get plugged up in here, so we're going to get that down. And what we're going to do here in a second is top off this bottle with the kombucha starter, the liquid. So if there's a little bit of honey left, that's fine because it'll get washed down. We're going to try to show this. We'll move the camera a little bit. So then I just top it off to the lip there is about where I'm going to put it. And there will be bubbles in here. And so you do have to let it settle for a few seconds. There's not too many bubbles there. Just keep in mind, I might have overfilled that a little bit, but that's okay. You can see, yeah, I topped it off a little too much, but that's fine. We're just doing everything by heart today. We're just winging it. Then we're going to cap it, and then I usually give it a little shake. Get everything mixed up in there. And so if you use the blender, and so the raspberries at that point would be liquid and it'd be mixed with the honey, it would mix better, but I'm not waking our children up just for that. Just mix that up. That's almost perfect, actually. Right about there. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to do the same thing with these other 3 bottles, or however much I can make, how many bottles I can make with the starter that I have. But we're going to let this sit just on the kitchen counter for probably at least 2 days. And you want it to stay in a spot that's like, you don't want it in the fridge, and you don't want it too hot either. The sweet spot is like 70 degrees, so really room temperature, like 68 to 70 degrees. And so, because that's the temperature that the bacteria will thrive. And so you want the bacteria that's in the kombucha you just added to feed off the sugars and the fruit and the honey. And so the end product will hopefully be a good tasting carbonated kombucha. You can see there's already bubbles, but that is just because of the first ferment. So that's all the bacteria that's been created and giving off the carbon dioxide gas. We're going to set that aside. I'm going to work on these other 4, and then we will show you how to feed the kombucha. So enjoy me filling up these bottles in fast motion. Sometimes you just gotta figure it out. I think that's anything with life. Sometimes you just gotta figure it out. I also got this other funnel. Just pour it in one at a time. That'll help. Thinking about how we want to slow things down. Just the way the world is working, everything's going so fast. And Sarah and I's goal is to really just slow down and enjoy life, everything God gave us. Like the great Ferris Bueller said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. I think that's our new motto. So bottle number 2, I have to keep an eye on that one because it looks like the piece there's coming up a little bit. So we'll just keep an eye on that one. I do need to top it off a little more though. That's the 3rd bottle. Give it a good shaking. Mix, mix, mix. Mix, mix, mix. Okay, So that is the bottling process, and you can try out different flavors. So that's the bottling process. Again, you can try out a bunch of different flavor combinations, whatever you're interested in, or go to Reddit or any other website and see flavors sound good, what other people have tried. So this is just a pretty basic, just single fruit. But I've also made like strawberry lemon, which was pretty good. Obviously raspberry. I've made like orange before. It didn't turn out as well as I thought. I made an apple cinnamon one time, and that was not good. I've also tried coffee kombucha, which I use coffee with a little bit of like I think I used sugar with the kombucha, and that did not turn out well. I think I called it kafucha, and it was would not recommend it, but some people might like it. It was like a really sour, foamy coffee, and just wasn't my thing. So, anyways, got this cleaned up, and then we will show you how I feed feed my kombucha. I don't think I mentioned this, but we did give our kombucha a name. So this his name is Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald the ferment. Fitz for short. He goes by Fitz. So we like to have a little fun with our ferments. Sarah's sourdough starter is Edgar Allan Doe. So I don't know, just a fun way to do that. So let me get this cleaned up, and then I'll show you how I feed Fitzgerald. Okay, so I got some water on the kettle boiling, and so we're gonna go ahead and feed Fitzgerald here, and I'm going to completely eyeball this because this is a continuous brew, and that's what I do. So I've probably got like 2 cups in here, maybe 3 cups. So I'm just going to use that as kind of a general guide, and that's my starter. And so when I tell you the recipe for feeding the first ferment, um, that is what the starter is. It's the leftover kombucha from your last first ferment. So you always want to save a little bit. You want to save as much as you want to make for your next batch. So the master recipe I use is for the sweet tea, I'll make 4 cups of water, 1/4 cup of sugar, and then I'll use as much tea that your bag calls for 4 cups of water. So that might be like 3 or 4 tea bags. I used to use tea bags. So for every 4 cups of water, 1/4 cup of sugar, I would use 4 tea bags. But in this instance, I use black tea and green tea, both from Thrive Market. So the green tea calls for 1 tablespoon per cup, and the black is a half tablespoon per cup. So you got to do a little math there. I split it 50-50. So for 4 cups, I'll do 2 tablespoons of green tea, and then I'll use 4 tablespoons of black because that's what the recipe calls for on the bag. And then, so 4 cups water, 1/4 cup sugar, however much tea you need, and then 1/2 cup of starter. And so that is the master recipe. So I probably have 2 cups of starter here. So I could make, if I have 2 cups, it's at least 2 cups here. Um, I can make like a gallon of kombucha here. I'm not going to make that much because I don't have enough room in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to make 8 cups, which is half a gallon, and that should fit. That should almost top this off. So this is, I believe, a full gallon if you filled it up to the brim. I don't ever fill it that full just because I don't want to spill it and make a mess. So that should put it right about here. If I use 4 cups or 8 cups because I've already got like 2 or 3 cups of starter in there. So once the water is boiled, I'll bring that over here and I'll mix. I'll make the tea blend, and then we'll go from there. So I've got my boiling water from the kettle. So this is just under boiling. So how I do this, and this is just how my method. So I'm making 8 cups. So that means with the recipe would call for 1/2 cup of sugar. So I'm gonna put 1/2 cup of sugar in here, and I'm gonna put enough water to dissolve the sugar. Then I'm gonna mix this up. I'm gonna use a wooden spoon. Sarah. Sarah gets really mad when I use a metal spoon in a glass jar to mix. She said it's gonna break the glass, but I don't know. That's never happened to me before, so just joking. I have broken glass doing this before, and when you break glass and then half a gallon of sugar water goes all over the floor, that does not make a happy wife. Just saying. So what I'm gonna do, I've got my water here. You might also notice that this is not 8 cups. And so what I do, the thing is you can't put really hot water or hot tea in with the starter because it's going to kill the bacteria and then you have no more kombucha. So the tea has to be at like room temperature or less than 80 degrees, I think is the temperature. So it has to be less than 80 degrees before you put it back in here. So what I do is make like a tea concentrate batch. And so I put all my sugar and then all my tea leaves in here, and I used one of these diffusers, and then I let it sit for like 3 or 4 minutes, whatever it calls for. Or if you're using tea bags, same thing. And then once it's done, I'll add cold water to another jar to get it back to, about 80, 75, 80 degrees. And then I'll pour it in here. So I'm going to use 4 tables, or I got to do math for a second. It's wrong. I actually need, since I'm making 8 cups, and this is 1 tablespoon per cup, so I need 4 tablespoons of this. This is only half a tablespoon per cup, and I'm making 8 cups, so half. If I split them up evenly, I only need 2 tablespoons of this, because that would equal 4 cups, and 4 tablespoons of this, that'd be 4 cups. So 2 and 4 would make 8 cups of tea. It confuses me, so I apologize if I'm confusing you guys. So 2 tablespoons of the black tea, slide that in there. And then 4 of this green tea. I got this at Thrive a few months ago. It's lasted me a while. So this stuff is good stuff. So I got my tea diffuser in here. I'm going to pour the hot water in and let it sit for like 4 minutes. I think that's the steeping time. And you just want to make sure all the leaves are covered with hot water. And let that steep, and then we'll be right back. So it's been like 4 minutes. I've let this steep. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out, give it a couple more steeps. I don't know what you call it. I'm not a tea connoisseur necessarily. I just like to drink tea and kombucha. You also might hear our child woke up, one of our children, and so he is over there eating on some blueberries and some milk. So you might hear him. So this is obviously really hot, and it's split like that because the green tea is all on the bottom and the black one's on top. It's interesting how it separates like that. So a couple different options what you could do. You could fill up a jar with ice water, which we don't have any ice right now. So I just put some cold water in this jar, and you could put this black green tea mix, sweet tea, in that ice water and let it cool down faster. You want to get it back down to like room temperature. Or you could just let it sit on the counter for half a day and let it cool down. There's a few different ways. I'm going to pour this in the cold water and see if that helps. It might not be cool enough yet, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think this will be okay. And so what you want to do, since we're making 8 cups, we made the recipe to follow 8 cups of total sweet tea to the kombucha starter. You want to just top it off so that there's 8 cups of added liquid total. So I've got 6 cups here. So I'm going to pour that in, and it's cool enough. Before I do that, let me show you the kombucha here. So after the kombucha sat for 3 or 4 days in the first ferment, it forms this little mat on top. It's like a silicone mat. So that's called the pellicle, and that's completely normal. You want that there. That's what helps keep bacteria or like dust and stuff from getting into the good bacteria on the inside of the drink there. And then I also use this. I used to use coffee filters. And then Sarah got some of these. So these are really nice to just fit over top. This is really just to keep dirt and dust and like fruit flies out, because fruit flies will come to this because it is like a vinegar smelling drink. And so that is the purpose of this. You need to have it covered, but then you also don't want it to have super big holes. So like a tea towel or coffee filter, something like that would be fine. You don't want to use like a t-shirt necessarily. I don't know. Some people say you can. You just want something that fruit flies can't get into, and so that's the big reason behind that. Um, and so for the continuous brew, what I do is when I take some out, I'll keep topping it off. And so since I have so much starter in here, it should only take like 2 days to get that back up to where it is now, because there's so much starter in there. It speeds up the process quite a bit. And so once I mix it all up with the sweet tea that I just made with this starter, it's like here in 2 or 3 days I should be able to do this process again. And so that's the continuous brew process. The more starter you have in here, the faster it goes. So like if I had this much starter and I drank a glass and got it down to here, I could top it off to get sweet tea enough to fill it back up to here, and then it'd be ready like the next day, because there's so much starter, it's just going to keep feeding. Now the problem with this is, since it is so fast, I've had it where like it's so fast that it turns way too sour way too quick, and then you have to dump it. And so that's something you have to keep in mind, of how much you want to make versus how much you're actually going to use and how fast it's going to go. And so you do have to play around with it a little bit. And I don't like to waste any of our kombucha. Once it's gone too sour, at that point it is basically vinegar, and so you could use it for like salad dressings, like a vinaigrette. You could use it for like a vinegar cleaning solution. We use kombucha vinegar to clean, or you could just bottle it and save it. And then um, it's always good to have some extra starter on hand, just in your pantry, in case this ever like goes bad or goes moldy. The only reason this would go bad is if you ever find mold on top of here. Knock on wood, I've never seen that, um, but it is possible. See if I can get a good clear this up a little bit. So that is not mold. It's just where the silicone mat or whatever, the pellicle is just thicker in some spots. So that's not mold. Um, it's hard to see when you're not in person, but it would be fuzzy. It would be clearly like white or pink or green mold. It'd be fuzzy. So you would clearly be able to tell if it's mold or not. Okay, so since this is cool enough, I'm going to dump this into my starter. And so there's 6 cups. I'm going to add 2 more to make it 8. Mr. Whalen's chomping away on some fresh blueberries. Sarah and Danny and Whalen went to the blueberry patch the other day. We got some fresh blueberries. There's 2 cups, and so that filled this up pretty well, about exactly where I wanted it. So, and you can play around with this. Once you do this more often, or once you start doing it, you'll get used to how much you need, versus the size of your container, and how much starter you have. And it's really not that much of a exact science. You can play around with ratios of sugar and tea leaves or tea bags. It's just whatever you want, and then how long you just let it sit. Um, it's you're not going to hurt anything, and it's if you find mold, then just throw it out and start over. So it's really not that big of a deal. And once you keep doing it, you will get used to it. So we're going to cover this up to make sure it's all covered. And so this is the kombucha feeding process. Let me show you here. That is the finished product. I'll let this sit on the counter for the next few days, and then we'll do this again. I mentioned shrubs earlier. We'll talk about shrubs a little bit. So what a shrub is, we got this recipe from our local, it's not local, they're about 2 hours away, but they are like a fermentation bar, and so they serve kombucha like instead of alcohol, which is really cool. They make shrubs, which is you're just going to take your kombucha vinegar, your starter, you're going to mix it with some kind of fruit syrup. And so we make our own. What I would do is mix equal parts fruit and sugar and let that sit for a few days, or you could cook it on the stove. And you're just making a simple syrup with fruit. And then you would add a little bit of syrup, like probably like an ounce of syrup per 16 ounces of kombucha. And you can do a few different things. What my wife Sarah likes to do is add like a sparkling water to top it off. Sometimes she'll use coconut water. She'll just play around with it a little bit, and so it's a nice, refreshing drink. If you don't like the super sour kombucha taste, you can use a shrub with like coconut water or sparkling water, and it's a little more refreshing and a little lighter if you're not into the straight kombucha. So I'm going to sign off here because my child Waylon is he's getting pretty wild. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just let us know in the comments, and I'll try to link some of those Reddit pages where I get recipes, as well as the base recipe below. But like and subscribe if you're liking our stuff, and hope you come back for more.